She was just the nanny, quiet, kind, black and invisible to the rich family she served. But when something went missing, the lady of the house accused her in front of everyone, humiliating her, slapping her reputation in public. What no one knew, that nanny was actually a billionaire and owner of the estate. And when her secret came out, jaws dropped, alliances shattered, and one little girl revealed the truth that silenced the entire mansion. Before we find out what happens next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story is already hitting home, make sure you hit that like button. Now, let's get into it. The air in the Whitmore mansion was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low, confident hum of old money. Light from a dozen crystal chandeliers glittered across the marble foyer, catching on diamond earrings and the polished rims of champagne flutes. The guests, a curated collection of the city's upper crust, moved like schools of exotic fish, their laughter echoing off the high, frescoed ceilings. They spoke of summering in the Hamptons and the latest stock market trends, their voices a symphony of casual privilege. In the corner, almost blending into the shadows cast by a towering marble statue, Monica Ellison stood with a stillness that defied the room's frantic energy. She wore a simple pressed grey uniform, a stark contrast to the glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos surrounding her. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her face calm and observant. She was, in this world, designed to be invisible. Her sole focus was the small girl beside her, 9-year-old Emily Whitmore, who was fidgeting with a delicate silver bracelet on her wrist. The bracelet was a simple chain with a single charm, a tiny silver bird, but to Emily, it was a treasure. Monica watched her with a gentle patience that felt ancient and deep. Emily was the only one in the house who truly saw her, not as a uniform, but as a person. She clutched Monica's hand, her small fingers a warm anchor in the sea of detached adults. Suddenly, the smooth symphony of the party shattered. A shriek, high and sharp, cut through the chatter, causing heads to turn and conversations to halt. Lana Whitmore, mistress of the mansion, burst into the foyer from the grand staircase. Her face, usually a mask of carefully applied makeup and bored superiority, was twisted into a canvas of raw fury. Her blonde hair, perfectly coiffed just an hour ago, now had strands escaping in her agitation. Her eyes, wide and frantic, scanned the room before locking onto the quietest corner, where Monica and Emily stood. Time seemed to slow as Lana pointed a trembling, diamond-ringed finger directly at Monica. "You!" she screamed, her voice cracking with accusation. A hush fell over the crowd. The air crackled with a new, ugly energy. Guests froze, their champagne flutes paused halfway to their lips. Lana stormed across the marble floor, her high heels clicking like angry heartbeats. She didn't slow until she was inches from Monica, her breath smelling of champagne and rage. "My necklace," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "My diamond necklace. It's gone." She didn't wait for a response. Her gaze swept over Monica's simple uniform as if it were a confession. "Where is it? What did you do with it?" Monica's expression remained calm, but a deep coldness settled in her stomach. She could feel every eye in the room on her, dozens of pairs of eyes, judging, dissecting, and convicting her in their minds. Emily squeezed her hand tighter, her small body trembling. "I haven't seen your necklace, Mrs. Whitmore," Monica said, her voice even and steady, a stark contrast to Lana's hysteria. Her calmness only seemed to enrage Lana further. "Don't lie to me," Lana shrieked, her voice echoing in the sudden dead silence of the foyer. "I know it was you. You were the only one upstairs in the master suite today. You were supposed to be watching my daughter." "I was with Emily all afternoon, in her playroom," Monica replied, her voice retaining its unnerving composure. She held Lana's gaze, refusing to look away, refusing to show the humiliation that was clawing at her insides. This was the moment she had been dreading, the moment her investigation had warned her might come. But the reality of it, the raw, public degradation, was far worse than she had imagined. A tray of fresh canapés sat on a nearby table. Monica had just been about to offer one to a guest who had looked in her direction. In a fit of uncontrolled rage, Lana slapped it. Not at Monica, but at the tray in her hand. The silver platter clattered to the floor, and a dozen delicate glasses filled with shrimp cocktail shattered against the marble. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room, Red cocktail sauce splattered across the pristine white floor like blood. Shards of glass skittered across the marble. The spell of polite society was broken. Instantly, the modern reflex took over. Phones, like sleek black weapons, were drawn from pockets and purses. A dozen screens lit up, their lenses all pointed at the scene, the furious socialite, the splattered floor, and the black nanny standing amidst the wreckage, her face a mask of stoic dignity. The recording had begun. Monica felt the invisible weight of those lenses, each one capturing her humiliation, freezing it in digital time for the world to see. Emily, who had been frozen in shock, finally broke. A gut-wrenching sob escaped her lips. "Mummy, stop," she cried, her small voice filled with a pain that cut deeper than any of Lana's accusations. Monica didn't do anything, but Lana was too far gone, lost in her own performance of righteous indignation. She barely glanced at her weeping daughter. Her entire world had narrowed to the woman in the grey uniform, the woman she had already tried and convicted. The quiet, invisible nanny was now the center of a very public, very ugly spectacle, and Lana was the one directing the show. For a moment, Monica let her eyes close, shutting out the glares, the phones, and the shattered glass. She was shaken, yes, but not broken. This was not the end, it was the beginning. Lana's face was a mask of triumphant fury. She felt the eyes of her guests on her, and it fueled her. She saw not condemnation for her outburst, but validation for her suspicion. She leaned in closer to Monica, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss, laced with the poison of generations of prejudice. "People like you," she whispered, the words sharp and deliberate, meant to slice deep. "You come into our homes, you eat our food, and you think you can just take whatever you want. You always think you can get away with it." The stereotype hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It was an accusation far uglier than the theft of a necklace. It was an attack on Monica's very being, on her character, on her race. Monica did not flinch, she did not recoil, she did not even blink. She simply held Lana's gaze, her own eyes clear and unyielding. Inside her, a cold, hard resolve was crystallizing. She had come here to observe, to audit the character of the Whitmore family. The audit was now complete. She had all the data she needed. The silence in her response was more powerful than any denial. It was a refusal to engage with the ugliness, a refusal to be dragged down to Lana's level. It was a mirror, reflecting Lana's own vile prejudice back at her, and Lana, seeing it, grew even more enraged. "Mummy, that's not true," Emily cried again, tugging at her mother's expensive silk dress. "Monica is my friend. She would never steal." Lana finally turned to her daughter, her face a storm of irritation. "Emily, be quiet," she snapped, her voice cold and dismissive. "Adults are talking. Go to your room." She made a shooing motion with her hand as if waving away a fly. The casual cruelty of the gesture, directed at her own child, sent another wave of discomfort through the room. A few guests shifted on their feet, their gazes dropping to the floor. They were uncomfortable, but their discomfort was not enough to make them speak. Silence was easier. Silence was safer. "Security," Lana bellowed, turning away from her daughter, and scanning the room for the 2 guards posted by the main entrance. "I want her searched. And I want her out of my house." The 2 guards, large men in ill-fitting black suits, began to walk hesitantly toward the scene. They looked deeply uncomfortable, caught between their employer's screeching demands and the silent, dignified woman who stood her ground. "You are fired," Lana declared, pointing a finger at Monica as if delivering a final damning verdict. "And I will make sure you never work in this town again. I will call the agency. I will have you blacklisted. You will be lucky to find a job scrubbing toilets." The threat was delivered with absolute certainty. In Lana's world, she had the power to make such things happen. She could ruin a life with a single phone call. The guests began to whiff it amongst themselves, their voices a low murmur that filled the cavernous space. Some looked at Monica with pity, others with a hint of suspicion. Had she done it? Could the lady of the house be wrong? But no one spoke up for her. No one challenged Lana. Their collective silence was a form of consent. The head of security, a man named Henderson, finally reached them. He looked from Lana's furious face to Monica's calm one. "Ma'am," he said to Monica, his voice low and respectful, a stark contrast to Lana's shrieking. "If you would please come with us." We just need to wait in the servants' room while we figure this out. He avoided her eyes, a clear sign of his own shame and discomfort. Monica gave a single slow nod. She looked down at Emily, whose face was streaked with tears. She gave the child's hand a gentle, reassuring squeeze before letting go. Then she turned and walked away, flanked by the 2 security guards. She did not look back. Her posture was perfect, her back straight, her head held high. Her dignity was a shield she carried with her, impenetrable and intact. But as she left the grand foyer, leaving the whispers and the stares and the shattered glass behind, her eyes were like chips of ice. The humiliation was temporary. The injustice, however, would be answered, and the reckoning would be absolute. The story of how Monica Ellison came to be standing in that foyer, accused and humiliated, did not begin with a nanny uniform. It began 3 weeks earlier, with the signing of a document in a sterile, glass-walled boardroom high above the city. The name on the document was Elysian Estates LLC, a bland, forgettable name for a shell corporation. The signature, however, was Monica's. With that flick of a pen, she had become the new, secret owner of the sprawling Whitmore estate, and a dozen other luxury properties like it. The Whitmores were now her tenants, though they had no idea. They believed they were renting from a faceless international conglomerate, a distant landlord who was happy to collect their exorbitant monthly payments and leave them alone. But Monica was anything but distant. She had purchased the portfolio of properties for a very specific reason. The Whitmores had been flagged on her radar for months. Financial reports showed they were consistently late on their payments, living far beyond their means, propped up by a dwindling family trust. But it was the other reports that concerned her more. Whispers from service staff, complaints filed with vendors, and a high turnover rate of maids, gardeners and nannies, all pointed to a toxic environment. There were allegations of exploitation, verbal abuse, and contracts being broken. These were the things Monica Ellison did not tolerate. So she had devised a plan, one she had used before to great effect. She would go in herself, under deep cover. She contacted the most elite nanny placement agency in the city, an agency she also happened to own through another one of her holding companies. She knew Lana Whitmore used this agency exclusively, valuing its reputation for providing highly vetted, discreet professionals. Monica created a flawless, albeit fictional, resume for a woman named Grace Porter. Grace was experienced, quiet, and had impeccable yet untraceable references. As the owner, Monica ensured Grace's profile was pushed to the top of the list when Lana called, looking for a new nanny for Emily after the last one had quit abruptly. The interview was a formality. Lana barely looked at the resume. She was more interested in Monica's appearance, plain, non-threatening, and in her eyes, appropriately subservient. She asked a few perfunctory questions, her attention mostly on her phone. "Can you start Monday?" she had asked, not waiting for a full answer. "The uniform is in the staff quarters. Gray. Be on time." And just like that, Monica Ellison, a tech billionaire who had built an empire from scratch, became Grace Porter, the nanny. Her mission was simple and direct, to conduct a quiet, personal audit of the Whitmore family's character. She wanted to see their behavior firsthand, unfiltered. She wanted to understand the truth behind the reports. She needed to know if they were a family facing temporary hardship who deserved grace, or if they were people rotten with an entitlement that poisoned everything they touched. Her plan was to stay for a month. She would observe their interactions with each other, with the staff, and with the world. She would assess their integrity, their kindness, their basic human decency. At the end of the month, she would make a decision. The land the estate sat on was incredibly valuable. A developer had already made a massive offer to buy it and build a series of luxury condominiums. Selling would be the most profitable move. But Monica's business philosophy wasn't just about profit. It was about principle. If the Whitmores proved to be good people in a tough spot, she had the power to help them. She could restructure their lease, forgive their debt, and give them a chance to get back on their feet. But if they were who the reports suggested they were, arrogant, cruel, and exploitative, she would not hesitate. She would evict them, sell the land, and erase their toxic presence from the property she owned. For 3 weeks, she had been a ghost in their home. She cared for Emily, a bright, lonely child who was starved for genuine affection. She observed Lana's casual cruelty to the maids, Richard's willful ignorance of his wife's behavior, and the constant tension that simmered just beneath the surface of their perfect-looking lives. She saw it all, and now, standing in the center of the foyer, accused of being a thief, she had her answer. The audit was over. The decision was made. Monica's crusade against the entitled and the cruel was not born in a boardroom. It was forged in the fires of her own childhood, in a small, cramped apartment that always smelled of bleach and her mother's exhaustion. Her mother, Eleanor Ellison, was a maid. She was a kind, hard-working woman with hands that were perpetually chapped and a smile that could light up a room, even when her body ached from scrubbing other people's floors. For 15 years, Eleanor had worked for a single wealthy family, the DeWitts. She had raised their children alongside her own, cleaned their cavernous house, and polished their silver until it gleamed. She was loyal, dependable, and utterly devoted. Monica grew up watching her mother leave before sunrise and return after dark, a ghost in her own life, all for the sake of another family's comfort. Then, when Monica was 12, it all came crashing down. A pearl earring, a family heirloom, went missing from Mrs. DeWitt's jewelry box. There was no search, no investigation. There was only an accusation. Mrs. DeWitt, a woman who had known Eleanor for more than a decade, looked her in the eye and called her a thief. She fired her on the spot, refusing to pay her final month's wages, and threatening to call the police if she ever set foot on the property again. The accusation shattered Eleanor. It wasn't just the loss of her job. It was the loss of her dignity. The family she had dedicated her life to had cast her aside like a piece of trash, branding her with a lie that she could never erase. The rumor spread through their small community, and Eleanor could no longer find work. The shame ate away at her, dimming the light in her smile until it was gone completely. 2 years later, the DeWitts' own son confessed he had stolen the earring to pay off a gambling debt. They never called to apologize. They never sent the wages they owed. Their silence was a final damning statement of her worth in their eyes. That event became the defining moment of Monica's life. It planted a seed of cold fury in her heart, a determination to build a world where the powerful could not crush the powerless without consequence. She vowed she would never be like her mother, helpless and at the mercy of others. She would be the one who owned the house. She threw herself into her studies, earning scholarships that paid for her entire education. She had a brilliant mind for logic and systems, which led her to the world of technology. While others were partying in college, she was in the library, coding, building, and planning. She started her first tech company from her dorm room with $2,000 she had saved from part-time jobs. By the time she was 29, she sold it for $100 million. But she didn't stop. She poured that money into her next venture, a data security firm that revolutionized the industry. By 35, Monica Ellison was a billionaire. She had more money than she could ever spend. But the memory of her mother's tired face and broken spirit never left her. It became her guiding principle. She began quietly acquiring assets, businesses, real estate, and companies that employed thousands of working-class people. Her philosophy was unique. She believed that the character of the people in charge mattered. When she acquired a company, she would often go undercover herself, working on the factory floor or in the mailroom to see how management treated their employees. When she bought luxury properties, she instituted a policy of quiet audits for high-value tenants. She wanted to know who she was allowing to live on her land. She wasn't just a landlord, she was a gatekeeper. The reports about the Whitmores had struck a particularly raw nerve. The casual cruelty, the sense of entitlement, the exploitation of staff. It was the story of the DeWitts all over again. It was a pattern she had sworn to break. That was why she had put on the uniform, endured the condescension, and subjected herself to this life. She needed to see it for herself, to feel the sting of their arrogance, to confirm that the poison was as potent as she suspected. And now, sitting in the sterile quiet of the guest house, having been dismissed like a common criminal, she knew Lana Whitmore was DeWitt, reincarnated in a designer dress, and Monica was no longer the helpless 12-year-old girl watching her mother cry. She was the owner of the house, and the time for judgment had arrived. The guest house was small but comfortable, a world away from the cold marble and simmering tension of the main mansion. Monica sat on the edge of a neatly made bed, the grey uniform feeling like a costume she was now desperate to shed. The silence in the room was a balm, allowing the chaos of the past hour to settle. The public humiliation, the false accusation, Lana's venomous words, they swirled in her mind. But beneath the sting of it all, a steady, powerful resolve was taking its place. She was just about to pull out her phone to make the first call, when a tiny, hesitant knock came at the door. Monica paused. It was too soft to be one of the security guards. She opened the door to find Emily standing there, her small face stained with tears, her favorite silver bracelet clutched in her hand. The moment she saw Monica, the little girl's composure crumbled completely. She threw herself forward, wrapping her arms around Monica's waist in a desperate, clinging hug. "I'm so sorry, Monica," she sobbed into the fabric of the uniform. "I'm so sorry." Monica's heart, which had been hardening into a shield of cold resolve, softened instantly. She knelt down, wrapping her arms around the trembling child. "It's okay, Emily. It's not your fault," she whispered, her voice gentle. Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Her gaze was earnest and fierce. "You didn't take anything," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Mommy's lying." Monica looked at the child, at her unwavering belief, and felt a surge of warmth. In this entire house of deceit and arrogance, this little girl was the one pure, honest soul. "I know she is, sweetie," Monica said softly, "and I believe you." Emily's eyes widened, and she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I saw her," she said. "I saw Mommy earlier today. Before the party, she was in her dressing room, and she was acting weird. She took her necklace off and put it inside the big metal box in her closet." The safe. Emily was talking about the safe. A chilling stillness fell over Monica. This wasn't just a lie born of panic. It was a premeditated act. Lana had staged the entire thing. For what reason? To get rid of her. To create drama. The motive didn't matter, as much as the cold, calculated cruelty of the act itself. She had planned to humiliate her from the start. Monica kept her face calm, not wanting to alarm the child. She looked into Emily's trusting eyes. "Emily," she said, her voice very soft and very serious. "That is a very important thing that you saw. Would you be brave enough to tell someone else what you saw? If I asked you to?" Emily's lower lip trembled, the thought of confronting her mother clearly terrifying. But then she looked at Monica's face, at the person who had shown her more kindness and attention in 3 weeks than her own mother had in years. She nodded, a single decisive jerk of her head. "Yes," she said, her voice small but clear. "I'll tell, for you." A slow, determined smile touched Monica's lips. This was it. This was the key. The testimony of a child, pure and incorruptible. It was more powerful than any security footage or financial report. It was the truth. Monica gave Emily one last tight hug. "Thank you. You are a very brave and very good person, Emily Whitmore." After Emily had tiptoed back toward the main house, promising to stay in her room and pretend she was asleep, Monica finally pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved with swift, precise purpose. She sent a single encrypted text message to a number she knew by heart. The recipient was Ms. Chavez, her chief legal counsel and most trusted associate. The message was short and to the point. "Prepare the boardroom, the main one. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., the audit is complete. The verdict is in." She pressed send, the single word lighting up her screen. Delivered. The gears of her empire had just begun to turn. Justice, Monica knew, was not a solitary pursuit. While a child's testimony was powerful, it could be dismissed as fantasy. The word of an adult, however, was harder to ignore. As she formulated her plan, she thought of the other staff members, the silent, weary figures who moved through the mansion like shadows. They had all seen Lana's cruelty. They had all been victims of it in their own ways. But fear was a powerful silence. It kept their heads down and their mouths shut. An hour later, another knock came at the guest house door. This time, it was firmer, but still hesitant. Monica opened it to find Gloria, one of the senior maids, standing in the hallway. Gloria was a woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes etched with the lines of a long, hard life. She clutched a folded dish towel in her hands, wringing it nervously. "Miss Grace," she began, her voice barely a whisper. She glanced nervously down the hall, as if expecting Lana to appear at any moment. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Gloria. Please, come in," Monica said, stepping aside to let her in. The older woman entered the room, her eyes darting around, as if she had never been in this part of the estate before. She stood awkwardly in the center of the room, refusing Monica's offer to sit. "What happened out there with Mrs. Whitmore?" Gloria started, her voice trembling slightly. "It was wrong. What she said to you, what she did, it was just plain wrong." Monica simply nodded, waiting. She could see the conflict in Gloria's eyes, the fear of speaking out versus the need to do what was right. "She's done this before," Gloria said, the words rushing out in a torrent. "Not like this, not in front of a party, but she accuses people. A gardener, 2 years ago, she said. He stole one of Mr. Whitmore's watches, fired him. We all knew he didn't do it. Last year, a young girl, A cleaner, she said. The girl broke a vase on purpose. The girls swore it was an accident, but Mrs. Whitmore docked it from her pay for 3 months. She can be a cruel woman. Gloria finally met Monica's gaze, her own eyes filled with a mixture of shame and resolve. I was afraid to say anything. We all are. We need our jobs. But seeing you didn't cry. You didn't beg. You just stood there, looking her right in the eye. It gave me courage. Monica felt a profound sense of respect for the woman standing before her. It took immense bravery to cross the invisible line that separated the staff from the masters of the house, to risk everything for a principle. Thank you for telling me this, Gloria, Monica said, her voice filled with a genuine warmth. It means more than you know. I saw it all, Gloria continued, her voice growing stronger. I was cleaning the upstairs hallway when she went into her dressing room. I heard her in there. I know she was in there alone before the party started. There was no one else. Here was the corroboration. Another nail in the coffin of Lana's lie. Monica saw her opening. Gloria, she said, her tone shifting from warm to strategic. Tomorrow morning, there is going to be a meeting, a very important meeting. I am going to need people who are willing to speak the truth. It will be safe, I promise you. No one will lose their job for telling the truth. In fact, things are about to change in this house, for the better. Gloria looked at Monica, at the absolute certainty in her eyes. This wasn't the defeated Nanny she had expected to find, hiding in shame. This was a woman with a plan, a woman in control, a flicker of hope ignited in Gloria's tired eyes. For the first time in a long time she felt that things might actually change. What do you need me to do? She asked. A determined smile spread across Monica's face. Just be there, and when the time comes, be ready to tell them what you know. Let's make it count. Gloria nodded, her grip on the dish towel finally relaxing. I'll be there, she said, a newfound strength in her voice. As she left the guest house, her walk was a little straighter, her head held a little higher. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, not by a commander with a sword, but by a quiet nanny with an unshakable sense of justice. While Monica was building her case, Lana Whitmore was basking in the glow of her perceived victory. The party had thinned out, but a core group of her closest friends remained, gathered in the main drawing room. The shattered glass had been swept away, the spilled cocktail sauce mopped clean, but the electric buzz of the drama still hung in the air. Lana, a fresh glass of champagne in her hand, was holding court. She leaned back against a plush velvet sofa, the picture of righteous indignation. You simply can't trust them, she said, taking a delicate sip of her drink. The them was unspoken but understood by everyone in the room. Her friends, a collection of equally wealthy and insulated socialites, nodded in solemn agreement. I knew something was off about her from the moment she arrived. Too quiet, too observant. You can always tell. You were so brave. Lana, cooed a woman named Beatrice, who was wearing a necklace so large it looked like it could anchor a small boat. To call her out like that in front of everyone, I would have been terrified. Lana waved a dismissive hand, though she was internally preening at the compliment. It's not about bravery, darling. It's about protecting one's home, one's family. We let these people in, and we have to be vigilant. It's a sad reality. Her husband, Richard Whitmore, stood by the fireplace, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. He had been mostly silent throughout the ordeal. He was a man who preferred to avoid conflict, a trait that had allowed Lana's behavior to fester, unchecked for years. Are you sure about this, Lana? He asked, his voice laced with a mild, almost academic concern. Accusing someone of theft is a serious matter. What if you're mistaken? What if the necklace just turns up? Lana shot him a look of pure venom. Mistaken? Richard, are you listening to me? Of course, I'm not mistaken. It's gone. She was the only one with the opportunity. It's simple logic. She turned back to her friends, dismissing her husband as if he were part of the furniture. I'm already thinking about the lawsuit, she said, her eyes gleaming with a new, avaricious light. I should sue the agency for sending a criminal into my home. The emotional distress alone. She let the sentence hang in the air, allowing her friends to fill in the blanks with imagined sums of money. Richard sighed and took a long drink of his scotch. He knew arguing with Lana when she was like this was pointless. It was easier to just let the storm pass. He felt a fleeting pang of unease for the nanny. Grace, he thought her name was. She had seemed pleasant enough, and Emily adored her. But opposing Lana required an energy he simply didn't possess. He chose obliviousness as a survival tactic. Unaware of the storm brewing just a few hundred feet away in the guest house, Lana felt a surge of power. She had identified a threat, neutralized it, and reasserted her dominance as the queen of her castle. She gloated to her friends, her voice dripping with condescending pity. She should be grateful I gave her a job in the first place. People like her need people like us. It's the way the world works. In her mind, the social order was clear and fixed. There were the rulers and the ruled, the owners and the workers. She was, and always would be, on the winning side. She raised her glass in a toast. To getting rid of the trash, she said with a smug smile. Her friends laughed and raised their glasses in return, their diamonds glittering in the soft light of the drawing room. A circle of dragons celebrating on their hoard of gold, completely unaware of the knight sharpening her sword just outside their cave. Lana's sense of control was absolute, and she intended to wield it. The next morning, feeling refreshed and vindicated, she sat in her silk robe at a Louis Esquinte desk, a porcelain cup of coffee steaming beside her. The first order of business was to follow through on her threat. She would not just fire the nanny, she would destroy her future. She dialed the number for the elite placement agency, her fingers tapping impatiently on the polished wood of the desk. A cheerful, professional voice answered on the second ring. Prestige Placements. How may I help you? This is Lana Whitmore, she said, her tone clipped and important. I need to speak to your director of placements immediately. There was a brief pause on the other end. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. One moment. Lana smirked. The name Whitmore still carried weight. A few moments later, a different woman came on the line, her voice smooth and accommodating. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Susan. I understand there was an issue with your recent placement. Grace Porter. An issue, Lana scoffed. That's putting it mildly. The woman is a thief. She stole a diamond necklace from me last night. I had to fire her on the spot. She embellished the story, painting a picture of a cunning criminal who had infiltrated her home. I am calling to demand that you terminate your association with her immediately. I want her blacklisted. I want a personal guarantee that she will never, ever work in a reputable home in this city again. If I find out she has, I will personally see to it that your agency's reputation is ruined. The threat was clear. Lana waited for the inevitable groveling, the profuse apologies, the promises of immediate action. Instead, there was a brief, almost imperceptible pause. I see, Mrs. Whitmore, Susan said, her voice still perfectly calm. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will certainly look into the matter. There's nothing to look into, Lana snapped. Just do it. Make sure she never works again. We will handle it, Mrs. Whitmore, Susan replied, her tone giving away nothing. Thank you for your call. The line went dead. Lana felt a flash of irritation at the woman's lack of appropriate panic, but dismissed it. The agency would do as she said. They had to. Her reputation and her money depended on it. She hung up the phone, a cruel smile playing on her lip. She felt powerful, completely in control of the situation, and of the other woman's fate. Meanwhile, in the meticulously manicured gardens of the estate, another, far more significant conversation was taking place. Monica, now dressed not in a uniform but in sharp tailored slacks and a silk blouse, stood near a rose garden, her phone to her ear. She had shed the skin of Grace Porter and was once again Monica Ellison. A woman in a crisp, dark business suit stood beside her, holding a tablet. This was Miss Chavez, Monica's legal counsel, her most trusted lieutenant. Miss Chavez had arrived at dawn, her presence on the estate completely unseen. The call from Mrs. Whitmore to the agency came through at 9:02 a.m. Miss Chavez reported, her eyes on her tablet. It was recorded as per protocol. The threats to blacklist you were explicit. Monica nodded slowly, a cold, thoughtful look on her face. She is predictable. Arrogant people always are. They believe their power is absolute. She looked up from the roses, her gaze settling on the grand mansion in the distance. It looked beautiful in the morning light, a picture of wealth and tranquility, but Monica knew the truth of the rot that lay within its walls. Is everything in place for the meeting? Monica asked. The boardroom is secured, Miss Chavez confirmed. Invitations have been sent to all relevant parties. The Whitmores have been summoned via an urgent, Non-negotiable message from the property management group. The other tenants you specified have also been contacted, and Gloria has confirmed she will be there. And the paperwork drafted and ready for your signature, Miss Chavez said, tapping her screen. Eviction notice, breach of contract citation, and asset freeze on their rental account. It's all here. Monica took a deep breath of the cool morning air, the scent of roses filling her lungs. The contrast was stark. The beauty of the garden, the ugliness of the task ahead. But it was a necessary task. It was the culmination of her life's mission. Good, Monica said, her voice low and steady. Set the final meeting. I want 'em all there. I want 'em all to see. The weight of the decision settled on Monica, not as a burden, but as a mantle of responsibility. She retreated to her room in the guest house, the command center for her final move. The time for observation was over. The time for action was now. She stood by the window looking out at the sprawling grounds of the estate she owned. She saw a gardener meticulously trimming a hedge, a pool boy skimming leaves from the crystal blue water. These were the people whose dignity she was fighting for, the invisible workers whose peace was shattered by the whims of tenants like Lana Whitmore. She picked up her personal phone, a sleek, encrypted device that connected her to the nerve center of her global operation. She scrolled through her contacts and pressed a single name, Chavez. Miss Chavez answered on the first ring, her voice crisp and ready. Yes. Miss Ellison? There was no preamble, no small talk. This was the final confirmation. Ready? Monica asked, her voice calm but imbued with an unmistakable authority. It was the voice that had closed billion-dollar deals and commanded boardrooms filled with powerful men. We are ready on your command, Miss Chavez replied. Call the emergency board meeting for the Ellison Group, Monica instructed. I want the vote to proceed on the sale of the Whitmore parcel. Inform them that my personal audit has concluded, and my recommendation is to approve the developer's offer. The tenants have proven to be an unacceptable liability. Understood, Miss Chavez said. And the paperwork for the eviction? Prep it. I want the eviction notice, the breach of lease documentation citing the morality clause, and the immediate freeze of their account. I will sign it all electronically the moment the meeting with the Whitmores concludes. A new, harder edge entered Monica's voice. It is time to evict the Whitmores. She stared out the window, her reflection a faint superimposition over the image of the grand mansion. The house stood proud and beautiful, a symbol of wealth and power. But a house is only as noble as the people who live within it. The Whitmores had defiled this one with their arrogance and cruelty. It ends tomorrow, Monica said, more to herself than to Miss Chavez. It was a promise, a vow to her 12-year-old self. A final tribute to the memory of her mother. The DeWitts of the world would not win. Not this time. Not on her watch. With a final decisive tap, she ended the call. The machine was in motion. The trap was set. All that was left was for the prey to walk into it. Lana Whitmore was in her element, directing the household staff like a conductor leading an orchestra, when her personal assistant entered the room, holding a tablet with a troubled expression. Mrs. Whitmore, an urgent message for you. Lana took the tablet, her brow furrowed in irritation at the interruption. The message was displayed in a stark formal font. It was from Elysian Estates Management, the faceless entity she believed to be her landlord. The message was short, blunt, and alarming. Urgent and non-negotiable. Required emergency meeting regarding your tenancy. Mansion boardroom. Today at 10:00 a.m., your presence, along with Mr. Richard Whitmore, is mandatory. Lana stared at the screen, a mixture of confusion and indignation swirling within her. Non-negotiable. Who do they think they are? She muttered. Her first instinct was to ignore it. She was Lana Whitmore. She did not answer to summonses from property managers, but the word emergency gave her pause, and the mention of her tenancy. Were they behind on payments again? She made a mental note to yell at Richard about it later. What could this possibly be about? She said aloud to her assistant, who simply shrugged. Perhaps it's about the incident last night, Richard suggested, walking into the room. He had seen the message over her shoulder. Maybe the nanny complained to Lana let out a sharp, derisive laugh. Her? Complain? They wouldn't listen to a fired maid over us. Don't be ridiculous, Richard. Still, a seed of intrigue had been planted. An emergency meeting. It sounded important, dramatic. Perhaps they were going to offer her an apology for the agency's poor choice in staff. Perhaps they were offering a rent reduction for her troubles. Her arrogance quickly reshaped the situation into one where she was the aggrieved party, about to receive her due. At precisely 10 o'clock, Lana and Richard Whitmore walked into the mansion's boardroom. It was a grand, imposing room, with a long mahogany table and leather chairs, usually reserved for Richard's rare business dealings. Lana entered with an air of annoyed importance, expecting to find a single nervous property manager waiting for them. Instead, she stopped dead in her tracks. The room was already occupied. Seated around the table were two other families, tenants from the other large properties on the estate. At one end of the room, standing quietly against the wall, were several staff members, including Gloria, the maid. Lana's eyes narrowed. What were they doing here? A knot of unease began to tighten in her stomach. And then she saw her, standing at the head of the long mahogany table, where the chairman of the board would sit. It was the nanny, but it was not the same woman from yesterday. The drab grey uniform was gone. In its place was a stunning, all-black power suit, tailored to perfection. Her hair was down, styled in a sleek, elegant cut. Her face was the same, but her entire demeanor had transformed. The quiet subservience was gone, replaced by an aura of absolute, unshakable power. She wasn't Grace Porter, the fired nanny. She was someone else entirely. What is she doing here? Lana hissed to Richard, her voice a mixture of shock and fury. I had her fired. Richard was just as stunned. He stared at the woman, his mind struggling to process the radical transformation. Before either of them could say another word, the woman at the head of the table looked up, her gaze sweeping across the room before landing directly on Lana. Her eyes were cold, clear, and held an authority that silenced the entire room. The meeting was about to begin. The silence in the boardroom was thick and heavy. All eyes were on the woman at the head of the table. Lana, for the first time in a long time, felt a genuine tremor of fear. This was wrong. This was all wrong. The woman she had fired, the woman she had tried to ruin, was standing in a position of power, looking at her not with fear but with the cool, appraising gaze of a judge. Good morning, everyone, Monica began, her voice calm and resonant, filling the room with an effortless authority. Thank you for coming on such short notice. For those of you who do not know me, allow me to introduce myself. She paused, letting the anticipation build. Her eyes locked with Lana's. My name is Monica Ellison. The name hung in the air. It meant nothing to Lana or Richard. But then came the next sentence. I am the CEO of the Ellison Group, the parent company of Elysian Estates, and I am the owner of this estate, and every property you currently reside in. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Jaws literally dropped. The other tenants stared at her, then at each other, their minds reeling. Richard Whitmore went pale, his hand gripping the back of a chair for support. But the most dramatic reaction came from Lana. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty white mask of sheer, unadulterated shock. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The carefully constructed world she inhabited, a world where she was at the very top, had just been vaporized. The nanny, the maid, the woman she had humiliated, was her landlord, a billionaire, the owner of her home. That's not possible, Lana stammered, the words catching in her throat. Monica ignored her. She gestured to a large screen on the wall, which flickered to life. For the past 3 weeks, I have been conducting a personal character audit of my tenants, specifically the Whitmore family, following numerous complaints from staff and vendors. On the screen, security footage from the gala in the foyer began to play. There was no audio, but the images were damning. It showed Lana's hysterical entrance, her finger pointing, her face twisted in rage. It showed her slapping the tray from Monica's hands, the glass shattering. It showed the circle of guests pulling out their phone. It showed Emily crying, ignored by her mother. Lana watched the silent movie of her own cruelty, her face burning with a shame so intense it was almost physical. Monica let the video play for a full minute before turning it off. The silence that followed was deafening. She turned her cool gaze back to Lana. Last night, in front of dozens of guests, you publicly humiliated me. You falsely accused me of theft. You used my position as your employee to degrade me, and you assaulted me. Lana couldn't form a sentence. Her mind was a whirlwind of denial and panic. At that moment, a small figure stepped forward. It was Emily. She had slipped into the room unnoticed. She walked right up to the table, her small face set with a determination that belied her age. "She's lying," Emily said, her voice clear and loud, ringing through the silent room. All heads turned to her. "My mummy is lying. I saw her. I saw her hide the necklace in her safe before the party. Monica didn't steal anything." Lana looked at her daughter as if she were a ghost. "Emily, what are you doing here? Go to your room," she hissed, her voice cracking. But Emily stood her ground, her eyes fixed on Monica. "No. It's not fair." Monica then gestured to the staff standing by the wall. "Gloria, would you care to share your experiences with the Whitmore?" Gloria stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her, her voice shaking but firm. "Mrs. Whitmore, she does this. She accuses people. She threatened me last year, said she'd have me fired because I broke a plate. She docks our pay for things that aren't our fault. We are all afraid of her." One by one, Monica presented the evidence. Financial records showing months of late payments, copies of formal complaints from 2 previous nannies, a signed affidavit from a gardener who was fired over a false accusation. The case was meticulous, overwhelming, and irrefutable. Lana Whitmore was speechless. The power, the control, the arrogant certainty she had woken up with that morning had evaporated, leaving her exposed and utterly defeated under the cold, bright lights of the boardroom. Monica let the weight of the evidence settle in the room. She looked at Richard, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes, his face a grey mask of regret. He finally understood that his passivity, his desire to avoid conflict, had been a form of collaboration. He had enabled this. Then she looked at Lana. The fury was gone, replaced by a desperate, panicked pleading in her eyes. She was looking for an escape, a way to rewind time. But there was none. "Your lease agreement with Elysian Estates, like all of our tenancy agreements, contains a standard morality and conduct clause," Monica stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "It stipulates that tenants must behave in a manner that is lawful, respectful, and does not create a hostile or abusive environment for staff or other residents. You, Mrs. Whitmore, have violated this clause. Repeatedly, and spectacular." She picked up a single sheet of paper from the table in front of her. It was the eviction notice. "Therefore, as of this moment, your lease is terminated. You have 24 hours to vacate the property." The words hit Lana like a physical blow. "No," she whispered. "You can't do this." "I can, and I am," Monica replied coolly. Richard finally found his voice, stepping forward. "Miss Ellison, please. This is our home. There must be something we can do. We can pay. We can apologize." "An apology?" Monica's voice was laced with ice. "An apology does not undo the damage. It does not erase the humiliation, the threats, or the culture of fear your wife has cultivated in this house. This is not about money, Mr. Whitmore. This is about accountability." She glanced at her tablet, which Miss Chavez had placed before her. With a single tap of her finger, she executed the command. "I have also frozen your rental account with our property system. All associated privileges, access to club facilities, house accounts with our approved vendors, have been revoked. Effective immediate." It was a swift, total, and brutal severance. Lana looked around the room, at the faces of the other tenants who were watching in stunned silence, at the staff who were no longer afraid to meet her gaze. Her entire social standing was collapsing in on itself. Then Monica did something no one expected. She looked at Gloria. "Gloria," she said, her voice warming slightly. "For your courage and for your years of dignified service under difficult circumstances, I am offering you the position of on-site property manager for this estate. You will report directly to me. Your salary will be triple what you are currently earning." Gloria's eyes filled with tears. She could only nod, her hand flying to her mouth in shock and gratitude. The message was clear. Justice was not just about punishment. It was about restoration. Finally, Monica swept her gaze over the other tenants, the silent, uncomfortable guests from the party who she had also summoned. "And to those of you who stood by last night and said nothing," she said, her voice dropping, each word landing like a stone. "To those of you who watched a woman be falsely accused and humiliated, and chose your own comfort over basic human decency, take note. Your silence was loud, and it has been noted." She let that final chilling statement hang in the air. The verdict had been delivered. There would be no appeal. The aftermath was as swift as it was merciless. Within the hour, a professional moving crew, dispatched by Monica's company, arrived at the mansion. They were efficient, discreet, and impassive. They began the methodical process of packing up the Whitmore's life, placing priceless antiques and designer clothes into plain cardboard boxes. Lana stood in the middle of her opulent bedroom, watching as strangers dismantled her world. She tried to argue, to protest, to assert an authority she no longer possessed. "Be careful with that. That's a Ming vase," she shrieked at one of the movers, who simply nodded and continued his work. The movers had been given one instruction: to treat the items with care, but to ignore the former tenants completely. She was invisible to them, just as Monica had been invisible to her. Richard was on the phone, frantically calling his lawyer, his banker, anyone he thought could help. But the eviction was legally airtight. The breach of contract was undeniable. Monica Ellison had built a fortress of a case, and there were no cracks to be found. The news of the dramatic meeting spread through the estate like wildfire. Staff members, who had previously walked with their heads down, were now whispering in the hallways, a current of excitement and liberation in the air. Onlookers, including other tenants and staff from neighboring properties, began to gather at a respectful distance on the sweeping front lawn. Their phones out. This time, the cameras were pointed at Lana. They recorded her as she was escorted from the front door of the mansion by a calm but firm security detail from Elysian Estates. Her face was a wreck of tear-streaked makeup and disbelief. She tried to argue one last time as she passed Monica, who was standing near the doorway, observing the proceedings with a calm, detached air. "You can't do this to me," Lana pleaded, her voice a desperate rasp. Monica didn't even turn to look at her. She simply walked away, back into the mansion she owned, without a single word. That silent, final dismissal was the ultimate expression of power. It was the digital age's guillotine. The clips started appearing online within minutes, first on local social media pages, then picked up by gossip bloggers, then by national news outlets. The story was irresistible. The headline wrote itself: "Rich socialite humiliates Nanny, discovers Nanny is secret billionaire landlord, gets evicted." The video of Monica's calm, powerful reveal in the boardroom, leaked by one of the other tenants, went viral. "Billionaire Nanny and Karma is a mansion" trended worldwide for 48 hours. People were captivated by the story. They cheered Monica's quiet grace and her strategic takedown of a classic bully. She became an overnight folk hero, a symbol of righteous justice, for every person who had ever been mistreated by a boss, a landlord, or anyone in a position of power. Lana Whitmore, on the other hand, became a villain of global proportions. Her tear-streaked, defeated face a meme for entitled arrogance getting its just desert. Her fall was as public and humiliating as the one she had tried to orchestrate for Monica, magnified 1,000,000 times over by the unforgiving lens of the internet. A few days after the Whitmores had gone, and a semblance of peace had settled over the estate, Gloria, the newly appointed property manager, approached Monica. She was holding a small, sealed envelope. "Ms. Ellison," she said, a newfound confidence in her voice. "We found this in the little girl's room when we were cleaning. It has your name on it." Monica took the envelope. On the front, in the careful, looping handwriting of a child, was written, "For Monica." Her heart clenched. She had been so focused on the mechanics of justice, she hadn't had a chance to properly say goodbye to the one person in that house who had shown her pure kindness. She retreated to the quiet of the garden, the same spot where she had planned her final move with Miss Chavez, and opened the letter. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, and a small, familiar object fell into her lap. It was Emily's favorite bracelet, the one with the tiny silver bird. The note was short and simple. "Dear Monica, you were the only one who listened to me. You were the only one who made me feel safe. Mommy and Daddy are very sad now, but I know you did the right thing. You were brave. I hope I grow up to be brave and kind, just like you. I want you to have my bracelet, to remember me. Love, Emily." For the first time since the ordeal began, Monica Ellison felt tears well up in her eyes. It wasn't the victory, the viral fame, or the successful execution of her plan that moved her. It was this simple, heartfelt message from a little girl who had chosen truth over family loyalty, kindness over fear. This was the real victory. This was why she did what she did. To protect the Emilys of the world from the Lanas, she held the small silver bracelet in the palm of her hand, its delicate chain a stark contrast to the immense power she wielded. She closed her fingers around it, a silent promise to the little girl who had given it to her. Later that day she made a call to Miss Chavez. Her voice was soft, But the instruction was firm. "Chavez," she said, "I need you to find out where the Whitmores have landed. Specifically, I need to know about the child, Emily. Find the best school in her new district. A place where she can thrive. A place that values integrity and creativity." "I'm on it," Miss Chavez replied. "And then," Monica continued, "I want you to set up an anonymous trust. It will sponsor her entire tuition, from now until she graduates from whatever university she chooses. Make sure there is no possible way it can be traced back to me, or any of my companies. The girl deserves a chance. A real one." It was an act of quiet, invisible grace. It was power used not for revenge, but for restoration. It was the final perfect move in a game that had never really been about a mansion at all. Monica didn't just own property. She owned her story, her silence, and her power. She understood that wealth wasn't about the size of your house, but the strength of your character. Lana Whitmore believed her status put her above reproach, that she could humiliate a person she saw as beneath her without consequence. But she made a fatal miscalculation. She assumed the nanny in the plain gray uniform had no voice, no power, and no worth. What she failed to understand is that dignity is a currency more valuable than diamonds. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just fire a woman, it fired a warning shot at every petty tyrant who mistakes kindness for weakness and silence for submission. The world learned that day that true power isn't about shouting your importance from the rooftops. It's about having the integrity to stand tall, even when you are made to feel small. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who owns it all. The final image was not of a billionaire in a boardroom, but of a woman, Monica, walking past the grand gates of the mansion she owned, the late afternoon sun on her face, her head held high, completely at peace. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.